Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos podcast, a show where we talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a prepared individual and a survivalist in today's day and age. Back on the show with me today, my co-host, Jamie Franks, the Senior Chief. Jamie, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well, man.
For those that are not seeing us, but
right, seeing and hearing.
Which
I do
today
have
brought a lot of visual aids, so this one might be one that I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but maybe worth watching it on the YouTube stream if you're just listening to us on audio. So
okay, great. I did not bring the visual aids, but I'm glad that you did bring the visual aids. And we'll get into what we're going to talk about today. Obviously, it's when we discussed what we were going to talk about this week. Last week, we had a whole different topic of conversation, and then love it, hate it, whatever. It's entertainment. The video popped up on TikTok for this outdoor channel up in Alaska, and what's interesting about it is it's Alaska, right? I think Alaska is definitely on my bucket list where I want to go.
Yeah, me too.
I want to spend, but I want to go there and spend a fair amount of time. I would really like to go spend a month up there. It's so far out. You can't just do it for a weekend, right? I mean, and a week feels like it's going to be too short anyway. And when I say so far out, I mean, coming from the East Coast to Alaska may be a little bit more daunting than from California to Alaska.
Yeah, I can't remember if I mentioned this or not when we did the overland, emergency vehicle episode, but it has always been one of my goals, or one of my, like you said, bucket list things. I've always wanted to drive my truck and trailer all the way up the west coast of the United States, clip that little corner of Canada, and drive into Alaska and go all the way to Denali National Park and then back. But I would have done it by now, but the fact that you do have to go through Canada for a little bit, which limits one's ability to legally possess firearms. That's kind of an issue since I'm me, and especially going into, some pretty extreme wilderness, and also probably going through some slightly sketchy urban areas, along that route as well. That has been a little bit prohibitive, but that's been one of my bucket list things to do as well. And exactly like you just said, I wanted to do it that way so I could be on my own timeline, not buying plane tickets. I can stay for as long as I want, or cut it as short as I want, or whatever. But I know other friends that have done similar trips to that, and it looks awesome. But I to this point, I'm looking at my little map I have on the wall over there. I've been to most states in the United States, but I have never stepped foot in Alaska at all. So
yeah, I have not either. I mean, and one of our members and was the POC in Texas, and now is POC up in Alaska. She just moved back to Alaska. Her and her kids and her husband. Her husband's actually stationed down by you right now. But she loves Alaska and lived there, left, and then obviously moved back. So today's episode, we're going to kind of get into, and it's based off of a video and a YouTube channel, and we'll get into it a little bit more, but kind of like that Survivor situation, or Alone, both those TV shows. Obviously, Survivor, I think you're allowed 2 items. I don't know. Alone, you're allowed to pack a whole lot more. So on today's episode, we want to kind of discuss 5 things you can bring for a 2-day camp, in the wild, in the wilderness, if you will. And the reason this kind of came up was because of that video clip that I sent you.
Yep.
I'm sure you watched it, right?
Yep.
Okay. So, but setting the stage for what we're about to talk about, the 2 things, and both of those people that I'm about, are the one with the outdoor channel, or the Outdoor Boys, whatever it's called. And then there was another one, and it kind of goes back to what I was talking about on that overlanding thing. We were talking about adventure bikes.
Yep.
I watched a video where it was a female, and it was a group of them, a female and a bunch of other riders were riding from Texas on their adventure bikes to Alaska. And they were doing it over an extended period of time.
Yep.
that is another one. I mean, I would love to do that. That's a challenge. Now,
That
coming
would
from a guy,
seem very seasonal to me. I would think you would have to time that one a certain way.
I mean, yes and no. You know, these adventure bikes are, you know, they're not your road bikes, but they are obviously they're sure you have to worry about road conditions, 100%. But yes, you would probably do that more, you know, end of summer into fall type situation. You're not doing that in the dead of winter.
Yeah.
But you know, you talk about being a minimalist. There you go. But going back to this channel on YouTube, this guy, I first saw him on TikTok, and his videos were interesting. They were shorts, right? And then I found his YouTube channel, and it's his name is Luke, and I think he's the Outdoor Boys YouTube channel, right? Like, is that what it is? Just let me make sure that I'm saying the right thing here. His channel is the Outdoor Boys. Yes. So it's the Outdoor Boys on YouTube. If you want to see some cool stuff, check them out. He's got some wild videos, and he's done some wild camps, hikes and camps.
So yeah, I mean, and as a person that like I've been camping like literally my entire life. I mean, I can think back to like it's like I want to say it was like my 5th or 6th birthday. My dad, God bless him, like he's still alive. I don't mean it, God bless him in that way, just
Right.
like God bless his patience
Right.
or whatever. But
Yeah.
like he took me and like a whole bunch of other like 5 and 6-year-old boys that I was friends with, and like took us all out camping. And I mean, and then you know I've told stories just from the and I relate it to a parenting aspect because today it seems like most parents are like what you know what they call helicopter parents. But when I was in, it's this, I was my daughter's age, so my daughter's in 6th grade. When I was in 6th grade and 7th grade, and I grew up in the middle of nowhere, and um, with no prior planning at all, like my friends and I at school, it'd be like a Friday, and we'd be on the school bus, and we'd be like, "Hey, let's go camping this weekend." And so we would all like my friend Silas would get off the bus first, and then like, you know, a couple miles up the road, then I would get off the bus, and then a couple miles up the road, my friend Brian would get off the bus. And then we would all just like run home. And since something like my house was in the middle, of course, my driveway is about a half mile long. Like my dad, like you can barely see my dad's house from the road. That's the house I grew up
Right.
in. But um, we'd all run home, and we would like seriously just like leave a note like to our parents, like gone camping, be back Sunday, and leave it on the counter. And we would grab our camping gear and throw some ramen noodles in a cooking pot in our backpack. And then everybody would meet at my house, and then we would just trek off into the woods. And even we didn't know where we were going. We would just trek off into the woods until we found a good spot, and then we'd put up our little Boy Scout tents, and we would camp Friday night and Saturday night and come home Sunday morning. And like I said, we didn't even know where we were going, so that was not part of the note that we would leave our parents. We would just come home on Friday, decide on the school bus that we were going camping, go camping, and then come back. And guess what? It wasn't a problem. Like we never had a problem. And so I mean, I've been camping in one form or another. I was a Cub Scout and a Boy Scout, and then you know all the way up through high school, and when I joined the military, you know, just camping recreationally since then. And I promise I'm going somewhere with this discussion, but like I've discussed what I call the diamond of firearm ownership before, you know, where at the top narrow part of the diamond is when you buy your first gun, and then you buy 2 more, and then when you get to the middle part of the diamond is when you're like buying every gun you can get your hands on, and then when you get to the bottom part of the diamond, you're selling off all your crap. You're selling off 5 crappy guns to buy 1 good one. So by the time you get to the bottom of the diamond of gun ownership, you only have a few guns, but they're all really good and really thought out and really well set up. And I found through my camping journey that started as really when I was a small child, all the way through being a teenager into adulthood, and now you know now I'm in my mid 40s. I'm kind of finding myself in that, it's kind of in that same diamond, but with camping gear. Like in my early 20s, my friends and I, we did. Disclaimer: I never did the entire Pacific Crest Trail. So when I say I did the Pacific Crest Trail, like don't stolen valor me. Like we would just do section, like just small, like 1 or 2 day sections of the Pacific Crest Trail. At the time, I wasn't going full Reese Witherspoon, but we did the super duper minimalist, that if you read books or whatever, they call it fast and light camping. So like every single thing weighed out to the, down to the
Right.
ounce, and
Of
taking
course.
absolutely nothing you don't need, and your backpack made out of the absolute lightest material. And like when you read books about this stuff, it's funny because they kind of uh they actually like make fun of people that sleep in tents. They're like, oh, those stupid tent people. And like,
Oh
well,
yeah. I mean, well, it's funny. So go ahead, get to where you were
So
going, and then
anyway,
we'll
in my
come back to
20s,
it.
I was doing that with like, nothing wasted, absolute lightest weight, everything we could get, not taking anything we didn't absolutely need, to the point where we were taking big maps and just like taking scissors and cutting out just the little section of the map that we needed, because taking this whole big map, that might weigh an extra ounce or whatever. But I went from that into like overlanding, like we talked about, where I literally, because I have a truck and a trailer, I can, within reason, I can bring anything I want. Like the joke is
Right.
like everything but the kitchen sink, but the truth is
Right.
I could bring a freaking
Bring
kitchen
it to
sink if I wanted to.
exactly.
And so, and like, so now I've even gone from that, like, and I've kind of gone back down to this like quasi minimalist, but still like with a dip and a toe into the overlanding. Like it's, I camp now with, most of the time, I camp now with a little bit more than I can carry on my back, or that I would want to carry on my back. But now I've gone from like truck and trailer loaded with gear, like down to like everything fits in this little plastic box. And I have these two little plastic boxes. One is all just like miscellaneous camp stuff, for lack of a better word, and then the other one is all camp kitchen stuff, but it fits in these two little plastic boxes. And I found that, like, actually, and a lot of times, kind of to the point of this episode, even those two little plastic boxes is really more than I need, because every trip I go on,
Right.
there's something in those boxes that I don't even touch, so.
Exactly. So, and my experience, obviously, yep, same type of thing. Did some camping growing up. Started doing a little bit more of it lately, and it's been, it's that what they're calling car camping, right? I mean, you load up the truck with everything that you're going to bring, and you go to a campsite.
Yep.
I've wanted to take that a step further, and I'm supposed to do that this weekend. I'm actually supposed to meet Paul Taylor in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, on a moto camp. So we're both loading up the motorcycles, which obviously there's no loading up the motorcycle. It's you're loading up a pack,
Mm-hmm.
and that's that. Um,
Well, I'm so motivated also that any camp I go to is a moto camp.
No, you are totally motoed out. But so to prepare for this camp this coming weekend, and I say potentially because now looking at the weather, there is some weather coming in. Do I mind camping in the rain? Not so much. Do I want to ride 3.5 hours in the rain? Definitely not. I don't want to ride 3.5 hours in the rain, set up camp in the rain, and then camp in the rain, and then like it's just all rain at that point. So
So like one of my deployments, I've done two deployments to South America, but the most recent one, and I think it comes from people's inexperience or just the way people's mind works or whatever. When we were doing our loadouts, like going on this deployment to South America, out of everybody in my little unit, I was the only one that brought my rain pants. Everybody brought rain jacket. I was the only one that brought rain pants. And so when we got down there in the jungles of Central America and we were in those like just torrential downpours, I was dry from head to toe. Everybody else was dry from
sure.
head to wiener, and they were
Right.
soaked from the waist down. And
Yeah.
just that little bit of difference of just me being I was literally the only one that brought my rain pants. So I was completely dry and I was okay. I mean, the fact that all your stuff gets wet and everything's a little bit of a pain in the butt or whatever, but like just the fact that I was completely dry, I was okay. And everybody else was miserable.
Yeah.
Just, so
going from the car camp situation, which I can relate to what you're saying. Like I have a tent that I use for car camping that is not the tent that I'm planning on using this coming weekend. Do I want to get to a point where there is no tent involved and it's either a hammock or, and we'll get into what this guy uses for bedding going in a little bit, but I have the same thing. I have a large square Pelican that has all of that gear in there.
Mhm.
Which is, it's very convenient when you are just pulling up to your site and then you can just go back and forth to the
Yeah.
truck and get everything set up. To your point, I open that case and there's things that I do not take out of there. When we go for those weekend camp trips, whoever I'm going with, if it's a couple of guys, it's my friend Jamie and her son, or whatever the case may be, we set the campsite up to be like a little fun time. Like I'll run 100 feet of rope, crisscross across the thing, and we'll hang the lanterns off of it so the campsite is lit up. And
Yep.
like we go to town, I bring a little grill and we cook. And even when I would go with my buddy Andy, like we ate like champs, like kings, like bringing a giant OtterBox cooler loaded with pork tenderloins, and we did chicken breasts. But that's not, whether the people that are hiking with the lightest weight packs on their back and eating ramen noodles or whatever, they may look at it at a different, as maybe not as hardcore camping, but it's still a form of camping.
And I'll tell you, like, just a mere few minutes ago, you and I were both cursing modern technology, but
Yes.
you really, and I don't think this is much of an exaggeration, like technology has helped us so far. I mean, even if you were specifically referencing camping gear, and we specifically reference like the last 20 or 25 years, I mean, there's been so many advances just made in like basic technology. Just for an example of that is like LED lights. I mean, like LED lights have come so far in such a short period of time, that it's made a huge difference in the camping gear space,
Right.
and you look at a good example, because we like to talk about movies sometimes, like at the beginning of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, it starts out when Indiana Jones is a teenager and his Boy Scout troop is like camping out in the desert of New Mexico or wherever it says it is. And like back then, I actually know a guy, or growing up, I knew a guy that had been a Boy Scout during that same period of time, like in the 1920s, and he still had his Boy Scout box, and I actually think he gave it to me, and I actually think it's still in my dad's barn, but that's a whole different thing. But it's this big wooden footlocker box,
Right.
and it has, and all the stuff that's in it is really cool, and it's this like super old school lantern and this super old school cook set, and like the tent is made out of this really heavy canvas, and it has
Right.
with these big ropes and all this stuff, and it's like everything that's in that box. I mean, that box is like the size of my dining room table almost, and
Right.
like everything that's in that box, I could fit the modern equivalent of that into a relatively small backpack, so
Yeah.
just insofar as advances in technology, we've become able to basically fit equivalent stuff into a smaller package, which helps when you're talking about stuff like this. But one of the things you said, every time I go camping now, it's like I kind of leave my camping gear kind of set up where, like, if you told me right now we were going camping, I could probably be ready to go in less than half an hour. It would just be a matter of
Clothes
packing,
for me.
well, packing food, like, grabbing some food out of the cabinets, out of the freezer or whatever, and getting my clothing squared away, and then putting everything in the car or the truck, and I could be ready to go, because for the most part everything stays set up. But every time I go camping, if I go 2 or 3 camping trips and I know this thing in my little camp box that I call it, if I haven't touched this thing, it's coming out.
Comes out, right? Yeah.
So because
No, good point.
I always like to look for a better way and look for a better mousetrap, and
so I have two I have two Kelty packs, and one I think is a 55 liter, and then I think one is like a 75 liter. And for this coming weekend, I have it's also Kelty, it's a 2-man tent. The sleeping bag I have, so I fit everything into the smaller bag. And what I mean by everything is bag, tent, sleeping pad, a little cot, a little chair, cookware, tent poles, all of that fit in the bag. And then the only other thing I needed to add was clothing and then some food. and we are, I am bringing some of the like the ReadyWise meals that we sell through ZERT. I have some of those. I'm bringing some Mountain House ones, and I was like, okay, well, I'll bring some of those meals, but we're also going to be like, we're going to go for a ride allegedly if the weather holds out. So we may get lunch while we're out there. We could stop and get something and cook it on in the pan on a fire, but either way, I fit all that. And then I was like, okay, the only thing I have to do now is clothes. So I was going to get another bag and put clothes in it. I'm like, well, no, just go to the larger bag and you'll fit the clothes and everything. So I'm down to just one bag ready to go. Um, would I carry that large bag on a hike through? I don't know. I mean, it's pretty heavy, even though it's one with the, the internal frame there or whatever. But still, it's still very heavy. And when you get to that whole thing, ounces equal pounds, pounds equal pain, and especially hiking in terrain, that's a problem.
So one of the things that I really have come to embrace in recent years is I can't remember when I was first introduced to it. Maybe it was during that phase where I was doing the little sections of the Pacific Crest Trail and doing all the fast and light stuff. But in 2016, I went to Peru for 3 weeks and just did this backpacking hiking trip all through the Andes Mountains in Peru. And we did the entire Inca trek to Machu Picchu and all that stuff. But we did this hike to Rainbow Mountain and this hike to the Salcantay Glacier, which that was way more difficult than Machu Picchu. But if you just I've embraced this concept of just having one layered outfit. So basically you're only wearing one set of clothes that you can transform this one set of clothes into whatever you need it to be. Like I can take it all the way down to basically where I'm just wearing shorts and a shirt. And then I can build it all the way back up to protect me from cold and rain. But really it's one layered set of clothes. And so, I think I've sent you the picture before of what I took to Peru, and it all fit into what most people would call like a 3-day pack. But for 3 weeks, I really only had. It's kind of like Bruce Willis in The Sixth Sense. So I just had one pair of clothes that I could just configure differently for whatever the weather or the altitude or whatever was, and it worked out beautifully. The only real concern was I had to buy this stuff from REI, and I have this pair of pants that I love, and they're good for like everything except being wet. And so I bought this stuff from REI, and you put these, you take whatever you want, but I put my pants in the washing machine and dumped this stuff in there, and then it made the pants waterproof as well. So then I was good to go. So anybody that's listening, definitely look into that. And now I know where I got it from, because in the Navy, I was issued this 7-layer, they call it the 7-layer system. And it's basically one pair of clothes that you can layer it up or layer it down to either being in the hot jungle or in the freaking Arctic, but you just layer it up and down. But I did a civilian equivalent of that, and it served me very, very well for 3 weeks in Peru. And if I was going to do a similar trip, I would do the exact same thing again.
And I think it's very obviously it's very dependent on where you're going, what the climate is at that time. Like if you're camping in northern Maine in December, yeah,
I have actually done that, and
I don't think we need shorts, but obviously be smart about it. Going and kind of bringing this all full circle to today's episode and kind of the topic of it. The video that is in question here is he was going out to do a winter camp. How to survive. I think it was the initial topic, I think, was how to survive. Let me see if I think it's in the text that I sent you. How not to freeze to death, winter survival, camping, and bushcraft. And what's interesting about it is he starts the video with a wool blanket, and in the wool blanket, he puts his cooking pot, which in I'm sure inside of it has his stove, his saw, like his ferro rod, and was there much else in there? I don't think there was much else.
The little, like I call it a canteen cup, or the little pot.
Yeah, the
But
pot, which probably
yeah,
had some of more of his cooking stuff in it. The saw,
yeah. Which the
uh,
saw, I didn't when he first threw it down, I didn't even realize what it was until a couple minutes later in the video when he folded it out. But yeah,
when he unfolded it, yeah.
yep.
And so, and there may have been a couple other things that were in that
That was like a big
wool
steak or
blanket.
something. But
Yeah,
he,
yeah. Oh, yeah. He had a big steak. And we'll get so that's I
yeah,
want what's interesting about that is how he ate. Um, so and then he folds up the blanket, folds it up, rolls it up, ties a little piece of cordage on it, and slings that over his back, and then walks into the snow. And it wasn't like it snowed in your backyard and you had, a foot and a half. Dude was in I shin deep, waist deep. I don't know. I
yeah.
mean, at
What
one
like
point,
the place where he stops and decides to like set up his little camp spot? It was waist deep snow.
yeah, waist deep snow.
Yeah.
So walks in. Now, mind you, clothing wise, he's doing exactly what you just said. He had layers on. He
Mhm.
had something underneath. He had like a wool sweater, a jacket. He had his knife. So he did have a knife, but it wasn't in his bag. He carried that on him. And then by the way, the whole time he's filming this, he's doing his deal, whatever you want to call it, vlogging. Uh, um, and so he stops in a spot and he says, okay, well, we're going to camp here. So he clears out again. There was no shovel in his first little showing of what he brought. So
Yeah.
he starts clearing the snow with his hands and he gets down to basically ground. Um, and then, at some point, obviously, he takes out his wool blanket, unfolds it, and he brings out his saw. And he just starts going to town and cutting down firewood. And obviously, he's done this before, so he knows what he's looking for when it comes to firewood. And I think he found some birch, and it was that dried flake of that birch, which is great tinder. Um, and so, it's like a time lapse, but he's just throwing all of these pieces of trees into this area that he cleared out. And basically what he said is, I'm going to use the fire to dry the ground because that was the other thing. He brought a sleeping pad. No,
Mhm.
he did not did he
No,
bring a
he
sleep?
didn't.
Yeah.
Not the one he didn't have a sleeping pad in the one I
No,
saw.
that's right. He did not bring a sleeping pad. Um, so he was like, I got to clear this ground and hopefully it's dry enough where I can sleep on the ground. So makes this giant fire, clears this entire area with the fire, and creates, like you said, a waist deep cave, I guess, open top cave. But as he's doing it, the ground is just becoming wet. So, he's got to figure out how to make a bedding. He's like, because sleeping on the mud's not going to work. Long story short, he
Yeah,
uses
so
a
that's a good point though. He took a couple of minutes to talk about like once you he did all this work to like hollow out this like hole in the ground. He says it's about the size of a queen mattress, and yeah, it's like waist deep. So I mean 3 to 4 foot deep, depending on how tall he is, and he gets down to the ground and he's like, at this point you need to assess the ground composition, because
right.
if you have dug down to like a frozen puddle, that's no good. You need to
No
move.
good.
If it's frozen mud, you need to move because it's going to become unfrozen and you're going to be sleeping in mud. That's no good. He said it needs to be like kind of coarse soil that'll drain water, and then like
Right.
if there's like a layer in his case there was like some pine boughs or something that had been that had fallen to the ground before it snowed, and so it was really ideal. But he points out, like, if you put in all this work and you clear out all this snow and you get down to the ground and you find you have landed on frozen mud, he's like, you got to move.
Got to move. Right. So, and what he realized, even though it was draining, he was still going to figure out another way. And he kind of assessed right then and there that, okay, he was going to make a platform to sleep on.
Mm-hmm.
All he's got is a saw. And he even said it in the video. He was like, if I tried to clean these poles, he was making probably, I think he's taller. I think he's over 6 feet. I think it was like, I think he's like 6'2", 6'4", right around that area. So he's, cutting these giant poles from these trees that he's got. And he was like, I'm not going to try and clear these up with my knife. It'll take too long. Literally throws it in there with all this brush. Fire does the job for him. So he makes a bed over basically, well, he makes a bed with these poles, and that's what he's going to sleep on. The other key takeaway here is he didn't have a sleeping bag. He didn't have a tent. He was sleeping in the clothing that he wore, that layered system, and he had a wool blanket, which is, I think, a huge takeaway here. Like, if you're going to try any of this, don't bring something synthetic. No, can't, like, wool blanket is the way to go here. And what I thought was pretty awesome was that kind of that little hack that he threw out there. Like, he was like, if you're, if I don't know how he got to it, but basically what he did is he moved his bedding over, he moved the fire and then moved his platform over the hot coals, which obviously, adds some warmth to the situation. But he it was pretty impressive the way that he cleared that area out and moved the fire from one side to the other. Made a bed of coals.
Like, one thing that you just brought, like, so a minute ago we talked about how modern technology can be helpful in
Right.
making modern camping gear smaller and lighter, and can even perform better than stuff that because, like, using something basic like a lantern, you can have something way smaller now that's way brighter, that'll burn for, that will illuminate for longer than, like,
right.
This old school lantern that was the size of my head, back in the day. But one of the things you just brought up, the wool blanket. So, being in the Navy, I became very, very familiar with wool blankets at a young age. But, like, wool is legit, and, like, that's a good example of something where, like, the old way is kind of still the best way, because, like, even in search and rescue in the Navy, part of our SAR kit as a rescue swimmer is a, like, military issue wool blanket, because even when, so wool blanket, it's fibrous, it's not the same as cotton, even though, like, a lot of people, it to your fingers it feels similar to cotton, but wool is waterproof. Like, you can use a wool blanket as a tarp if you needed to, because the water will hit it or land on it, whatever, it's raining, and the water will kind of soak into it, but it'll shed water. And what I mean is, like, the water won't leak through, the water will still run down through the fibers, and it'll only drip at like the lower edges. The water won't drip through it. Wind doesn't penetrate wool.
Right.
So even if it's wet, it will still keep you warm. Where, like, cotton, the outdoors people call cotton the death fiber, because cotton absorbs water, holds the water, and wind can go through cotton. So if you're wearing cotton and it gets wet, you're going to freeze to death, even in a warm environment. That's one of those contrary to popular belief things. Even if it's very warm outside, if you're wet, you can still get hypothermia if you're wearing cotton. But like, wool pants, wool blankets, like I've got this pair of wool pants, and they're like kind of a, not an army green, like a forest green color. They look like something a park ranger would have worn in 1937, but they're freaking awesome. And then, and I use those military issue wool blankets for anything. So, long story short, like, that's an example of one thing that, like, technology hasn't really helped. Like, you can't go wrong with a good wool blanket or wool clothing. I wrote down a couple of other things from that video.
One last thing about that wool blanket, it's also flame retardant.
Yeah, you're 100%. I didn't even think of that. You're right.
Yeah,
because in a search and rescue environment, we don't deal with fire too much.
Right, but the whole point of that, and the reason why I brought that up, and then pick back up where you're about to leave off, is when he moved his platform over the hot coals, he put his wool blanket down on the logs. And so immediately somebody thinking about that is like, well, yeah, but then the it's going to catch on fire and he's going to be a hot burrito. No. So that was one of the things, obviously one of the benefits of going old school over new school here. Like, you couldn't have done that with a cotton blanket or even one of those synthetic down things, because it would have melted.
Yeah. So, and like, but just to be fair, the one major downfall of, like, carrying a wool blanket into a survival situation like that is, like, it's gonna, like, if it does get wet, it becomes very, very heavy.
Right. It does.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so
Couple other takeaways you had?
a couple other takeaways, just kind of in general, watching this guy, because guess what I'm about to talk about, Chris? Guess what I'm about to tie this into?
Fitness.
No,
No, all right.
it rhymes with maraining.
Training.
Training, right? So one of the things that I always talk about is like, and I forget who told me. It might have actually been Blake Miguez that's said this term,
Good old
because
Blake.
he talked about it like Jerry Mikulek. Like Jerry Mikulek has aligned a set of sights and pulled a trigger so many times that no matter what you or I decide to do, we could not start today and pull a trigger as many times as Jerry Mikulek has before we die, and there's no substitute for experience is where I was going with that. Like there, and I think, like I said, I think Blake Miguez is the one that told me that there's no substitute for experience. You need to get out and get experience, and that's another word for training. So this guy, if you watch this video, number one, he's very calm. He knew in advance he's only taking this little blanket full of stuff, this really handful of stuff that he rolled up in a blanket. But when he gets to where he's going, he's very organized, he's very methodical, he knows exactly what he needs to do in what order, because he has that experience. Because if somebody were out there like Michael Scott and video this guy the first time he ever went out there and tried this, he's probably jumping over there and coming over here and going, oh, I forgot this thing, and oh, I need to do this first, and kind of jumping around. But he now has so much experience that he is calm and organized and methodical and knows exactly how he needs to do everything in what order. He can start this thing over here while he does this other thing over there. And then the other thing that kind of you just alluded to is the little key pieces of gear that he chose to bring, even though it's not a high quantity of items. Everything was very well thought out and shaken out. And what I mean is, the reason why he brought the things he chose to bring is because he has that experience and he has used those pieces of gear before, and he knows that they're going to work. He knows that wool blanket is going to be able to not catch on fire if he puts hot coals under it. And he knows that that cook pot is going to work. It's the right size. It's going to work exactly what he wants it to do, because he has that experience. He has shaken out all his gear. And I mean, you've seen it. You referenced the show Alone earlier. We saw it on the earlier seasons of Alone primarily, but like people, several people on that show Alone, they brought that. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called a blast match. It's like a spring-loaded fire starter where you push the ferro rod into it, and it has like a really strong spring, and then you press the button and it releases the ferro rod and shoots this blast of sparks off the ferro rod.
Right.
I think there was like 3 or 4 people that tried to bring that thing on Alone, and it did not work for them. No. It's because they didn't shake their gear out first. They didn't try it first. They didn't train with it first. They didn't build experience with it first, and it bit them. And so people buy this like, oh, I saw this other guy on YouTube that used this fire starter. I'm gonna take that one. Never use it, never practice with it. Now you're in a survival situation, and now either you don't know what you're doing, or the thing doesn't work the way you thought it was going to. And that's just a small example of the importance of just watching this guy.
Right. Yeah.
Everything he had was very well practiced and very well shaken out because he has built that experience.
Yeah. Now one thing I will say, because there is another video, and I don't actually, I sent you one more, and then there was one that I watched. Actually, I watched it this morning, where obviously in that video he was wearing glasses. So you talk about he remains calm, and at the end of the day, guys, like for those that are listening here, it's a video that he's made, and he's put it through post-production. So there may be points of it where he does freak out a second, because this video that I'm about to talk about is he literally got dumped off of a train, and he went to go do this camp and then hike back to civilization type situation, and he camped out, and then he left, and he got however many yards away, and he realized he didn't have his glasses on anymore. And then in the video he stops and he's like, I lost my glasses, I left them there. And he went back to go find them, and he didn't have his glasses. He continued on, but what I found interesting about that is, whether he was as calm as he was when he announced it on video, or he freaked out, but then he continued on, and like he didn't just stop what he was doing and then call for emergency. I lost my glasses. He adapted and he overcame, and he continued on with his adventure, if you will. So
That
just
brings up a good point. Just sorry, not but
no, go
just
ahead.
about decision making. Like, okay, I lost my glasses, and substitute glasses with anything else. I lost my fire starter. I lost my
Right,
cigarette lighter. I lost the last little piece of food that I had. Like, do you waste time looking for it? Do you just immediately write it off? So I think in that example, he chose the right decision. Make a plan. Invest a little bit of time, because you don't know. Maybe you just dropped it 4 steps ago. Like,
right.
I've literally had that happen.
Yep.
Uh, or maybe you lost it 4 miles ago, and there's no possible way you're ever going to find it.
Right,
Invest a little bit of time to look,
right.
but then have a contingency plan to continue on, or have that training and experience that'll where it's not going to matter all that much.
Exactly. So going to the next piece of this is one of the things that we said, and I don't know, from the video it looks like he was only there overnight, so one
Yep.
night. But mind you, one night and I don't know what the temperature was there, but one night in sub we'll just say sub 30 degrees is probably more than most people could even handle. Take the fact that you have no shelter, and now cut that amount of people that can handle that in half.
Yep.
Um, and the next thing is, well, we talked about it, we alluded to it. One of the good things about that winter camping, I guess, is you don't really need a cooler with ice. You got that all around you.
Yep.
So what he brought with him as far as food was kind of really interesting. So he did bring a big honkin' steak, just a big hunk of meat. Um, he only had one pot. He didn't bring a little pan. He brought one pot. And what he decided to do with the one pot was to, what did he make? Beans? He
Yeah.
made chili. Or yeah, okay, he made baked beans. He had beans, poured it in the pot. Water, we're going to get to the water in a second, but he added some he had pork belly. Yeah, he
Mm-hmm.
had pork belly, cut that up, threw it in there. He had some uh curry, I don't know, he had some other like spices, and
Spices.
he
Yeah.
had some tomato paste, and he put it all together, mixed it all together, and literally dropped the pot on the fire with a
Mm-hmm.
piece of like tinfoil. That's it. He then took his steak, and we're going to get to the next part, which I really like, but he took his steak literally on the coals.
Yep.
Done.
It's
Um,
I've talked before about these things that are like kind of pre-programmed into us as Americans, and like this is another one of those things where like we have to have Purell on our hands, and we have to buy this fruit spray to wash your fruit and all this stuff. You have to wash the
right,
banana that you're going to peel the peel off of anyway, and so
right. Yeah,
um but yeah, like number one, eating a little bit of charcoal is like arguably good for you, but it definitely is not bad for you.
right.
And you know what? It's going to be a little bit gritty when you first bite into it, but it's fine. Like
Yeah.
it's not
The
poisonous. It's not going to hurt you.
exactly. The other thing that he made with his baked beans was bread.
Yep.
So obviously he prepared for this, right? So he made up dough the night before. So bread dough in
Yep.
a bag, in a Ziploc bag. And he was literally just taking off chunks of it, and he basically he puts it out there. He's like, you can cook bread one of two ways. He's like, you can make a flat disc, and put it on the coals, and then flip it over, and you got this wheel of bread. Or like he did, took a hunk of Gouda, made a bread ball, and then buried that in the coals. And he pulls it out, The bread is crispy. He cracks it open. He's got melted Gouda pouring out of this bread, and he's just dipping it into his baked beans and eating like a champ. And he says, he was like, the coals, on the bread and on the steak is taste pretty much like flour. And then once he started eating the chili or the baked beans with the bread, he took a piece of string, which is probably the string that he used to tie up his wool blanket roll, with a hook that he made from wood, a stick, and he hung his steak over the fire to finish cooking. And then literally he was just cutting away chunks of red meat and eating like a champ.
Yeah, so like one of the little survival tricks I learned in one of the survival schools I went to is like if you just do need like a little piece of string like that, just one little piece of string, like you can harvest that out of your socks. You can just pull one long strand of string out of your sock, especially if you're wearing wool socks.
Wool socks.
But one thing that I, again, like through my camping experience, through being a kid into a stupid teenager that thinks you know everything, but you don't really know anything, like into my 20s and into my adulthood, a lot of people that maybe don't camp very often, or like one of the things like I've gotten into probably over the last 10 or 15 years is camping is cooking over a fire, like cooking over an open fire. Number one, this goes back to the video editing. Like it takes a while. It takes longer than you think because if you're cooking over a fire, you do need to burn wood and basically reduce it down to hot coals. That takes longer than you think. So you need to plan for that. Number two, a lot of people, just because they think it doesn't matter, and I think this speaks to the experience piece, is people will like, you open your cheese, for example, and your cheese is covered in a plastic wrapper, they'll just throw it in the fire. Like if you're going to cook over the fire, do not burn trash in your fire. Like, because then I said a minute ago that, cooking over the coals and getting a little bit of it on your food is like not poisonous, not going to hurt you. That's not correct if you have burnt your, burnt plastic or threw a beer can or something like that into the fire before you cooked over it. That stuff will transfer into your food and can be harmful. So I just wanted to point that out. Like, number one, cooking over hot coals, it's great. Takes longer than you think. Yeah. And don't burn stuff in your fire.
Yeah. The other thing that I alluded to back there was we talked about water. He did not bring water.
Right.
What he did was melt snow.
Yep. Yeah, in a winter environment, that's one of the things that's very advantageous.
It is very advantageous, but he alludes to, in a number of his videos, the amount of time that it takes to melt snow.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's something to think about. Now, mind you, also think about it. He was making all this fire, and he was burning all of this wood, and all of that wood and that ash and that stuff and he cut all of these trees around his area. So, he like when he went and got snow, I mean, it was loaded, and he says it. He was like, there's floaters in it. So he's like, no matter how clean you think the snow is, you're always going to end up with floaters and things that settle down at the bottom. So, he literally pours the top off and then leaves the sinkers, if you will, at the bottom of his pot. So, but that's what he does. He takes that, he melts snow and he drinks that water.
Yeah, and so and a couple other things with melting snow. Snow is comprised a lot. There's like a lot of air in snow. So you take this huge piece of snow that you think is going to translate to a lot of water, and once it boils or melts down and all the fluffy air is gone out of it, like it takes a lot of snow to make a lot of water. There's conflicting data about this, but like one of the things I was taught in the military, and I don't have a ton of like winter snow survival experience, but they told us like don't eat snow because it will reduce your core temperature. Like always melt the snow into water and then drink it. But then like from the military perspective, the assumption is that we're always going to be on the move. We're always going to be trying to get somewhere or trying to self-rescue or trying to escape from something or whatever. So like one of the things we were taught is just scrape as much snow into your canteen as will fit, and then put it in your shirt, and your body heat will warm the canteen, which will melt the snow. But then that plays back into the fact that, like, even though your canteen was full of snow, that
Is
doesn't
now
mean your
half.
canteen is
Right.
now going to be full of water, right? It's going to be like half full of water. Yeah. So,
Right. And the the other thing obviously that he does, and this is, I think this is probably a little hack that everybody knows, but you know, he'll he will obviously drink some of that water, and he does have not in so much in this video, but in other videos, he's got a large Nalgene bottle that he'll bring with him, and he will obviously boil that water
mhm.
and pour that in there, and then he's got that water bottle of now boiled water, which is his kind of heat source, and he'll put that in his sleeping bag at night for that extra little bit of warmth. And then, by the time the morning rolls around, that's no longer warm. Hopefully, it's not frozen solid, but it is something that he does or he uses. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I agree. And I wanted to go back to you touched on, you described in detail like the food he brought, and so
Right.
and we're eventually going in this episode, like what are the 5 things that we would bring if we were
That's about I
uh
was where I
if we-
was going.
but
You read
so
my mind.
so with bringing food, should food be one of those things that you bring? And like in this guy's case, he had already pre-planned how long he would plan to be out. He knew how long he was going to be out, so he can decide whether or not to bring food, but he gets to decide that on his terms. And so if you're in a survival situation, that's not something that has been decided on your terms. And like when you tie that into the 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 rule of threes in survival, the human body can survive for 3 weeks without food. But I talked about it in the go bag episode. I always do put some type of we call it field stripping an MRE, basically taking
Yeah.
the big MRE packet and just get rid of all the crap that's in it that you don't need. And
Right.
you can field strip it actually down to quite a small little package. And that's something good to have, because if you're in a survival situation, one of the main points I wanted to point out is like, if you're not very, very, very experienced and trained, finding food out in the wilderness is very difficult. Like finding water is not so difficult. Like even in arid environments, you can find water usually without too much trouble. But foraging for food is very tricky and is very difficult. Like
Right.
you can tell yourself you're going to kill a squirrel or snare a rabbit or whatever, or you're going to eat this plant. But number one, that is actually one of the largest holes in my survival / camping game. Is I'm so bad at plant identification, and there's
Yeah.
so many plants that look similar, and this one will kill you, and this one is fine to eat, and they look nearly identical.
Right.
So finding food is very difficult. Number one. Number two, you're not always on your own terms. And number three, like food is a very comforting thing. So even though you technically could go 3 weeks and survive, your body can survive without food.
Right.
You're going to think more clearly. You're going to calm yourself down a little bit more. If you're with somebody else, I always bring it up. Like if you're with a kid, if you're
Sure.
if you're trying to survive
Right.
with your kid,
Yeah.
it's going to calm them down to have
Right.
something to eat. So that is something to think about. Whether when we about to narrow down the 5 things that we would bring, if we could only bring 5 things, should a little, in whatever form you choose, a little starter pack of food, should that be one of the things? I would say so, if we are doing this with an eye towards survival.
Right. So and it's like it was like a perfect segue to the topic of the day. So the question is to you, you are
I'm
going
ready.
to
Hit me.
you are going to test yourself for 2 days.
Okay.
That's 2 nights. We'll say 2 nights. Okay? 2-night camp. You can only bring 5 items. You are in a moderate temperature. So we'll say between 40 and no, we'll 45 and 65 degrees. You can bring 5 items. What do those 5 items look like, Senior?
Okay. Well, before I answer your question, I will issue a spoiler alert.
Spoiler.
a few years ago, when I say a few, it was probably 5 years ago, I planned to make a video for my YouTube channel where I did exactly this thing, where I was going to take, because your four priorities of survival in order are: shelter is your top priority, then water, then fire, then food is last. So I made a kit that I called my Swift kit, and this is different than a go bag. This is just a small kit. That's it right there. It's not even a backpack. It's just, you just shoulder it like a little satchel, but it has all the bare bones essentials that I would need to address shelter, water, to make a hasty shelter, be able to purify and drink water, build a fire, and then I actually have a field stripped MRE in it too. So, and I went out and I said, I'm going to survive for 24 hours with
Okay.
just this little kit. I didn't do 2 nights. I did
All right.
a full 24 hours. It was basically like from basically like noon on day one, or like it was probably a little bit before noon, but I did go a full 24 hours with nothing
All
but
right.
this little kit, and it was fine. And I was going to make a cool video on YouTube, and it just like, it was either going to be short enough to keep people's attention but not really very interesting, or it was going to end up being a 2-hour video that nobody would ever watch. And so I just ended up and I've always intended to go back and do it again and try to film it in a different way to make it where I could edit it to be both short and interesting. But really, so that leads me to my 5 items, and there's a little bit more than 5 items in this kit, but not really a
Okay.
whole lot. But number one, I would bring a fixed blade knife. I on a daily basis, like pretty much everywhere, all the time, I have a really good, high quality folding knife.
Sure.
But if I knew that this was going to be my goal within the parameters you gave me, I would do a good fixed blade knife, because a fixed blade knife can easily perform like a hatchet. You can do what they call batoning, where you take like
All
a
right.
tree limb and
Mhm.
hit it on the back of your knife, and it basically can perform very similar to a hatchet. I would carry a metal canteen, or a metal water container, and the one I said I brought visual aids, and I'm pulling this out of my Swift kit, but this is a it's a metal canteen with the little canteen cup.
Okay.
And this one is titanium, and it's made by a veteran-owned company called Heavy Cover
All right.
Incorporated. The website is Heavy Cover Inc. And if I can get it out of here, it even has the little lid. When you pull the
Sure.
canteen out of the cup, it has
Yep.
the little lid, because you said homie in the video used a little piece of aluminum
Tinfoil. Yeah.
foil,
Yeah.
but has a little tab, so you can either put a stick through there to lift this up if it gets hot. Um, but so anyway, so fixed blade knife of my choice, and then I would bring hopefully a
And
canteen and a canteen
and
cup.
and just for, obviously, for those who are just hearing and not seeing, that canteen is dual purpose.
Yes.
So it's not only to hold water, but you could also boil water,
Yep.
melt snow, cook in it, something like that. So
Yeah, and
okay.
but the main takeaway is, like, this military style canteen. It is a canteen, but it also does have the little cup or the little pot or whatever.
Right.
And then this specific one has the little lid to go with it too. So I highly recommend this piece of equipment. It's from Heavy Cover. There you go. You can see the little logo there.
There you go.
It's a veteran-owned company, so I like them. So that would be fixed blade knife, canteen, and then a tarp or a blanket. In my little Swift kit here that I call it, I do have there's a company called SOL, Survive Outdoors Longer, and they have a really high quality emergency tarp that they sell. I forget. It has some cool little name. Anyway, you could look it up. It's made by SOL. But a wool blanket, as we already discussed, would be a great choice. So a tarp or a blanket. Just again, for the weight and size consideration, I chose the one from Survive Outdoor Longer, because you can fashion it into like a pup tent. You can make a lean-to out of it. It can be a blanket. It can be a ground covering. You can use it. It's tough enough where, like, if you're gathering
Right.
firewood, you can use it to carry firewood. It's
Okay.
multi-use, really good. But that it addresses the need of making a hasty shelter. If you need to, you just need some cordage and some couple of sticks maybe, and you can make a tent or a lean-to out of that. And then going back to the knowledge and experience piece, you need a fire starter that you have experience with and that you know will work. Or I'm sorry, that would be one of my choices.
Yes.
And keeping in mind things like altitude. Where are you? Are you in the Rocky Mountains? Are you in Death Valley? Because above a certain altitude, a regular like butane cigarette lighter won't work anymore.
Right.
Above a certain altitude, butane is like basically no longer flammable. It becomes inert. So if you have a cigarette lighter and you just think you're going to use that, maybe you will, but you could be in a place where it won't work. So just whatever form that takes, a fire starter that you have experience with, that you know how to use and that you know will work. And then I said, because if I'm only going out for 2 days, food's not going to be a great concern for me. So I said for my fifth thing, a saw is, if you haven't camped with a saw, and I have one in my little kit here, it's a silky saw, S like a shirt, silky, SILKY saw. That's probably what he had in the video as well. They have many different ones, many different sizes, many different configurations. But I have a version of the one he had in the video, and I have it in this kit right here. And if you haven't camped with a saw, if you've only camped with like a hatchet or a knife, like buy one of those little limb saws and try it, because it is a game changer. Like,
I agree.
Could I cut things down again, like taking my fixed blade knife and using it as a sort of a makeshift hatchet? Yes, I could. But a saw makes everything so much easier and faster. So especially if you're in a survival situation where time is of the essence and weather's coming in, or you're getting cold, or it's getting dark or whatever, like having a saw is really going to be a game changer. So I would forego a little nugget of food in favor of the saw. So my 5 items are fixed blade knife, my little canteen with canteen cup, tarp, and fire starter that I have experience with, that I know I can make work. And my fifth thing is a saw.
There it is. There it is, folks. Pretty good selection of items. I'm kind of right there with you. We should say that, you know what, for the next time we'll say that food is not included, right? Because
Okay.
you could fit some pieces of food inside that canteen, much like he does, where he fits the food inside his actual cookware. And so one of the things I just saw, and I don't know where I saw this, but and I would love to find out why he chose that style saw. And I can't. What is that saw? That's considered a hacksaw, right?
I've always called it a limb saw. But
okay, so the saw that we're talking about here is basically that frame. So it's like
it looks like a trapezoid, and the bottom edge of the trapezoid is the saw blade.
Is the saw, right? And it folds into like just one straight piece of metal, and then it unfolds and clips together, and you have this. Now, the saw that I went with is actually just like a limb saw, that it looks like a big giant knife that unfolds into, and so it's got a handle and just the blade on top of it.
I think the one, I have a version of what he said in the videos is what I said. I just meant I would bet money his is the same brand as mine, but the one I actually have in my kit is what you just described.
Okay. So one of the other things that I've seen out there is, everyone's seen the pocket saw, where it's basically like a chainsaw blade with two handles, and you put it around a tree, and you go back and forth. I've seen a steroid version of that, which is a little bit beefier. Have not tried it. Don't know if it makes sense. I don't know that it does. I don't think it can be as versatile as what we're talking about. But
if for some reason, like, you were putting together like a ultra little compact minimalist survival kit, I mean, why not throw that in there? I have used one of those. I have one. It was given to me, so I tried it. It does work. This is another one of those things where it's harder than it looks. The guy that made the YouTube video that's trying to sell you the thing, like, of course, in his video, It's going to look super easy. it's harder than it looks. It's harder than you think. It does work. I was going to talk about this in a minute, but like I have this little bracelet, and it's a survival bracelet. It's made by a company called Super SA Straps, but it has this Kevlar cord in it. And that works really well and is really easy. The only limitation there is the size of what you're trying to cut through. You can't cut through stuff that's really thick, but I have used this Kevlar cord, and it actually does really well at cutting through smallish things. So if you're in a survival situation and you needed to cut things that were maybe depends. I guess it depends on if you've got Craig Sawyer wrists or if you have Jamie Frank's wrists. But like I could probably cut through a limb the size of my wrist with the Kevlar cord. But yeah, I know what you're talking about, like the little things that looks like a bicycle chain. But
yeah, basically. So, yeah, those are obviously some good items to bring, but I think the most important thing to take away from all that is, don't just put those items in whatever kind of pack and then go out and experience this for the first time. I mean, what I'm as we get to the end of the episode, and we kind of always try and bring it drive that point home. It's like it's the end of that GI Joe episode where knowing is half the battle. If you're looking to challenge yourself to do a minimalist style camp, do that wrapped up in a regular camp. Like, go camping with people and then kind of have a segmented section where you're just going to bring these items and shake them out while still having other things to kind of as a backup. Like, perfect the minimalist thing before putting the minimalist thing in action would be what would be my thought.
And like I had this idea, and I think it would be a good idea, but it would definitely rely on audience participation, which, I mean, as you and I've talked about, some people just want to buy morale patches and think that they're awesome without ever actually having to prove it. But like these bracelets, there's all different ones. I referenced them before. They're called Super SA straps. It's SUPERESSE straps. And there's all different ones. There's a sear one, like I'll give you the quick run. Like the sear one, it has like a little handcuff key hidden inside the buckle, and this one is for like escaping if you've been like detained in some way. I used to wear this one a lot, and the guys that I work with, or the guys I used to work with, like asked me what it was, and I told them. And so then one day they all decided to jump me and attack me, and they handcuffed me and zip tied me to a lifeguard chair and to see if I could use my bracelet to escape, and I did. I actually was able to successfully use the little things that are hidden inside this little survival bracelet to escape. But he makes there's one that's a sear one, there's one that's a search and rescue one. This one, if you actually unravel it, it has like a fire starter kit, and like all, you can look them up, but he has all different ones, but they're all these little survival bracelets. But inside the actual weave of the bracelet is all these like survival items. And so I had an idea where you could get one of these bracelets or whatever, or we could put out a list of 5 things that we come up with or whatever. And I said, like, the rule should be you can only be wearing like just regular pedestrian clothing, like nothing crazy. You're not like stuffing your pockets full of all kinds of extra stuff, just a regular set of pedestrian clothes that you would wear on a normal day. Your 5 survival items, or like something like one of these bracelets, or like like a little, I know like ITS Tactical, they sell this little survival kit that comes in this little like plastic, like it's basically like a plastic version of a Sucrets box or a Altoids tin.
Altoid tin, sure.
So regular clothing, some sort of basic minimalist survival kit, and then the other caveat I threw that I thought would be fun is you can take $10 and go to the Dollar Tree. And so with your regular set of normal everyday clothing, your whichever little minimalist survival kit you choose, and then you can take $10 and go to the Dollar Tree, and you have to survive for 24 hours or 48 hours, whatever we want to do, with only what you got for $10 at the Dollar Tree and your little survival kit. And I thought it would be fun to like see the different choices that people would make and see like what worked and what didn't, of course. But like I said, I mean, maybe that would just be a fun video series to do on my own, and just choose like different things every time. But I thought that'd be really interesting.
I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, there you go. If you've made it to the end, and we hope that you have, take what Jamie just said and challenge yourself. Try it. And then reach out to us and let us know, how did you fare? How did you make out? I'd be curious to see people's attempts. Obviously, be safe when you do it, please. But yeah, that's pretty awesome, man. I like that. I
Yeah, I
like that. I'm
figure
gonna.
unless you do something really stupid, 24 hours isn't really enough time to kill yourself. But
This is true. This is
but
true. Disclaimer, please.
never
Just,
underestimate the stupidity of people, though, I guess. But
I mean, I guess so.
not our
Yeah.
listeners, obviously. But
No, but it's just people in general, and make sure that you don't go overboard and try and prove something that you are not capable of proving. So that's all that we're saying here. But well, folks, that's it for today's episode. I feel like we've had a good time going into some of this. If you do want to check out that guy's YouTube channel, it's Outdoor Boys on YouTube. Obviously, you can watch some great videos here. You can learn a lot from what Luke does over there. And if we tag Luke in this and he ends up listening to this podcast or watching this on YouTube and wants to get in on some ZERT action, please make sure you head over and reach out and let us know, and we would love to have you on the show. Until then, Jamie, I know that you are heading out on a nice little holiday, so you be safe out there.
I am. As we referenced before, like the summer went by so fast. I did not have time to take any. I haven't really taken any sort of time off or vacation since last Christmas. And the summer went by so fast that I didn't realize it. So yeah, I'm taking my little vacation here in mid-September. So
awesome. Well, you be safe out there, and we'll catch up with you next week. Until then, everybody stay safe out there. Jamie?
Just one last little thing, because I like to leave people with stuff to look up. And disclaimer: I have no official affiliation with any of these companies I'm about to tell you about. I use their stuff, and I found it to be really good, legitimate gear. For fire starters, I think I have one of everything they make because I love their stuff. It's Exotac, EXOTAC, Exotac. The canteen that I brought out was Heavy Cover Inc. or Heavy Cover Incorporated. They make lots of other things besides the canteen, but the canteen is awesome sauce. The bracelets, again, were Super SA straps. Another piece of gear that I don't know the guy personally. I have no affiliation with him, but I also own a lot of his stuff. I've been buying his stuff since he first started it up on Kickstarter, and it's Firebox stoves. Firebox is all one word. Firebox stoves. It's these really super compact little camp stoves that are freaking awesome. And that's it. Other than that, get out and start building those reps and build that experience. Remember, knowledge is different than experience, and there is no substitute for experience, according to Blake Miguez. And other than that, it's easy to be hard. It's hard to be smart. So be smart and get out some training and experience.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We'll see you guys soon. Take care.